let's talk about the September 3rd global lab changes, which are the first look at PA's updated visions of the Ranger class. There is a handy document in the descriptions for details which a literate viewer can read to know about each individual change. This video will go over only relevant changes in the class's dynamics. This set of updates specifically aim to preserve and cement the playstyle of each class, making more tools available without altering strategy. Ranger as a class is significantly better off without becoming the latest flavor reroll, despite the doom and gloom about the community. Let us discuss these changes now. The most relevant gameplay affecting changes are the addition of back attack, evasive explosive shots, iframe on every second cast while on CD has been fixed, flow bypassing wind, tearing arrow, evasive landing shot, will of descending wind has been reworked into a usable skill, down smash reset has been nerfed, wind step backwards iframe linger restored. There are other important changes, but they do not fundamentally change how the game is played. Yes, Awakening received some new skills. They are nice. Read about them in the changes doc. In fact, I'm just going to wrap up Awakening. It's a top 5 duelist and will be hard to catch without a grab, overwhelming SA damage, or range chip. Small scale similarly improved to a lesser degree, and getting back the full extended iframe animation on backwards wind step just tops the cake. Succession, on the other hand, received a tremendous buff in the context of the content in which the spec is played. I will start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is the removal of every second iframe on evasive explosive shot, a change that the community is decrying as gutting of Succession Ranger. It is not. The class is not losing the mechanic in a vacuum. In exchange for the unreliable roll and pray, the class is receiving close to double damage, one highly potent range instant kill combo, one new continuous DPS rotation. Its highest damage ranged ability becomes worth using in group scenarios. Move Descending Current became a good skill. Charging Wind T3 add-on uptime no longer costs the Charging Wind cooldown, and most importantly, it gains the option to add burst into its kiting movement. How this all works I will go on into later in the video, but consider the context of gameplay, not just changes in a vacuum. Suck Ranger is played for group fights, and the point is not to hold a position and 1v1 warriors. That should not happen. Not with the DPS available to the class on this patch. The point is to reposition where someone else can help you, or where a diver no longer wants to chase you. If the Mabel has lost, then ODS would not have made the difference. What the class received is consistency. There are some slight adjustments that can still be made, but everything that is already on the patch is already putting the class into a fantastic spot, given its role. Now, I will go over the new mechanics to learn.
Flow bypassing wind is the core new skill of this patch. Remember that there were 2 animations for Charging Wind, a charged and a cancelled version. Bypassing Wind is the cancelled version of Charging Wind, split out into a new skill. It takes on the add-ons of Charging Wind but has an independent cooldown. Bypassing Wind replaces all instances of cancelled Charging Wind, procs the T3 add-on, flows from both 56 row bombs, instantly charges Tearing Arrow, becomes the basis of all the new combos, can be cancelled with Blasting Gust immediately without cancelling the cast, can probably also find your lost dog and make your father proud of you. This is the most basic mechanic, and it just involves A and D while holding Q plus both L and B and R and B. Also works going backwards, but slower. It doesn't really require more explanation than to keep it up for the 40% total crit buff and whatever else you put on Charging Wind. That of course assumes that you have 30% crit rate, which is more or less a locked-in must-have add-on for PvP. This is an expansion on the previous combo using the Tearing Arrow cancel property. With Tearing Arrow losing its even split in PvP, it will chunk. The key to correct inputs for bypassing wind Tearing Arrow is to input S and E immediately during the bypassing wind animation. You go Q, A or D, L and B, R and B, then let go of your keyboard presses and immediately add S and E. This is not going to be your first choice actually, because Blasting Gust, Sharp Feather, Penetrating Wind into Bypassing Wind and Tearing Arrow is going to do more damage due to potential air attacks on the Penetrating Wind, but Tearing Arrow damage has no cooldown and Penetrating Wind does, so have this combo in your repertoire for those times. We can keep cycling Tearing Arrow, Penetrating Wind, Bypassing Wind. Tip: try to always cancel only after 4 hits of Tearing Arrow. Turn on your effects audio and listen for 4 hits. You'll mess up here and there, that's natural. Keep practicing. If allowed to just sit there and cycle these skills, this is the most intensive range DPS in the game, period, because of the lack of damage reduction on the cooldown for Tearing Arrow. Recall that the 56 Raboms, Squall Shot and Tearing Shot have been reworked. Squall Shot's delays have been drastically reduced and both skills transition smoothly into Bypassing Wind as we mentioned, and Bypassing Wind can either be cancelled with Blasting Gust or flow into Tearing Arrow, depending on what you're looking for. That I have not seen other rangers make is, when casting Tearing Shot, do not use the left mouse input to fire. Rather, hold Shift X and then let go of Shift and Tearing Shot will fire without causing mistaken casts of Prime Ultimate Blasting Gust. So press Shift X, then quickly release Shift and press Shift R and B to complete the Bypassing Wind. Both skills can apply what you learned earlier about Bypassing Wind Tearing Arrow, but consider what you use each Rabom for. Squall Shot is used to deal damage to a grounded target, whereas Tearing Shot is a CC. Squall Shot, Tearing Arrow, Penetrating Wind, Bypassing Wind is a great burst combo for both PvP and PvE, but Tearing Shot into Tearing Arrow is a PvP stun into a PvP knockback, which is a bad CC combo. Instead, try using Bypassing Wind to cast Blasting Gust, and go from stun to knockdown to Penetrating Wind air attack and Tearing Arrow down attack. Since Will of the Wind has no inherent crit, it is more important than ever to integrate Bypassing Wind into the casting animation of Will of the Wind. This can be done easily by the following inputs: A or D plus F to start Will of the Wind, then add Shift, Q, L and B, and R and B. Then immediately on seeing the Bypassing Wind animation, let go of R and B and F. You should not be able to Will of the Wind until the buff expires due to stamina, but adding the L and B, R and B input anytime will re-trigger a fresh Bypassing Wind to refresh your buff. With the addition of reworked Evasive Landing Shot, here is the most distance that can be made under optimal conditions. The most important note is that you're able to cast Evasive Landing Shot from either an on cooldown ES or shotgun, then following up with Penetrating Wind, Bypassing Wind, and potentially Penetrating Wind, Bypassing Wind, Tearing Arrow for a Parthian shot style of return burst. This final mechanic is a rather fancy use of the updated Will of Descending Wind Rabom skill. If you recall, Will of Descending Wind was an unwieldy, range-fixed skill that could barely hit anything beyond a very specific set of locations. This skill has been reworked into something more like a projectile, striking the last target aimed at the end of the casting animation. Once again, it's the final, not the initial target that you hit, which means you can adjust during the casting animation. This can be combined with Will of Descending Wind's natural sliding cast to move aggressively. This is done by using the S plus L and B sliding cast input while facing backwards, then quickly 180ing the camera and aiming at your intended target, thus sliding forwards and aggressively attacking with the ability. And finally, very briefly, PVE. Awakening should be the preferred go-to specification for grinding most spots as it is on the live patch. Another video has been uploaded demonstrating the new PVE rotation. Note that in this rotation, waltz casts should be a flexible mechanic that you use to reposition, so use them at your best discretion. Overall, very positive impressions on the patch. I think the game is kind of moving in a good direction. I personally don't necessarily have the same vision, but this is going to be a state of the game that I can live with. I hope this video has been helpful to you, and I certainly hope that it has addressed some of the misinformation that have been floating around regarding the class rework.